why would Hollywood put that in the trailer, knowing that this is, that I mean, everyone in this country is in a dire fight for freedom? That doesn't help. And it seems to me that maybe there is Russian influence and Russian money.
Thank you, Joseph, for making us cry this morning. That was very moving. Joe Lindsley is quickly becoming an American treasure in broadcasting. Joseph Lindsley is in Ukraine. Joe, hello to you. Russia has been hit by what's being called the biggest drone assault since the war began. 6 regions, including Moscow, came under attack. And I'm wondering, is this the long-awaited Ukraine counteroffensive finally?
Bob, good afternoon from Kyiv. It's funny, I was thinking exactly the same. Ukrainians have been very good at secrecy in their strategy, and perhaps while everyone else is focused on the southern front, where there is small progress, perhaps certainly something like this would take great planning to send Ukrainian drones throughout Russia. And I've started to see some chatter that maybe this is a true counteroffensive, which would be very smart because it was done without pressure and people saying, why haven't you done this yet? And so all we can do is sort of, sit and watch. But it is, that the Ukrainian drone strike yesterday in the early hour, about 12:30, so 2 days ago, 12:30 in the morning, on that Russian airbase. It seemed that the Ukrainians did destroy several major Russian planes, and the reports indicate that these are the Russian cargo planes that carried the Iranian suicide drones that delivered them from Iran or other countries to Russia. And so, those drones have been such a menace to Ukraine. And so if indeed Ukrainians hit this, it's remarkable. And another interesting thing is, that air base, it's called Princess Ola Air Base, and it's 15 miles from Estonia, which means that Russia's NATO border is unprotected. And, so much of the Russian propaganda has said, NATO is attacking Russia. If Russia really were afraid of NATO, you think they would have that fortified. And things like this reveal that, Russia's only mission is right now to destroy Ukraine. I mean, that's been a mission for centuries. In fact, even the name of that air base is a reminder of this. Princess Olia, she was a Kievan princess many centuries ago. And the Russians, as they've so often done, they've tried to appropriate Ukrainian culture for themselves. It's not just with Ukrainian culture. In the 1800s, the Russian elites, sort of ashamed of their country for whatever reason, all spoke French. And there's this long history of sort of this victim mentality, feeling of inadequacy and trying to take other countries. This has been the history of Imperial Moscow. And so that base is called Princess Olia. But Ukrainians were smirking at this irony. And according at least to the legend, her husband was murdered. And in order to avenge her husband's death, she sent birds. Of course, it was a fairy tale, it was a legend. She sent birds with burning stripes attached to them to destroy the enemies. And those birds, on fire, sounds like drones. And so maybe as Ukrainians planned this attack, they were thinking of this deep history. And that history is also on Ukrainian minds right now because of Pope Francis's comments a couple of days ago. People are really upset because, in Western Ukraine, they're Greek Catholic, which means they're Eastern in style. They're kind of Orthodox in style, but they're part of the Roman Catholic Church. And Pope Francis spoke in a video conference to Russian youth, and he urged them to remember the greatness of Russian culture and civilization. And he even mentioned Russian czars, Catherine the Great and Peter the Great, which is really extraordinary because Catherine and Peter were both tyrants. And, Peter was really the one who started Moscow's expansionism in sort of the Renaissance times. And then Catherine the Great, one of her main missions was to stamp out the Cossacks in Ukraine because they could not be controlled. And so it's very strange that to Ukrainians and to people who support Ukraine that Pope Francis would even sort of be wishy-washy on this, but let alone actually actively praise that Russian culture. And there are many people thinking back to the debate about Pope Pius and Hitler, And you think, now, are we not clear about genocide? Haven't we learned enough through human history? And so there's a lot of frustration that even world leaders, even religious leaders, don't seem to be paying attention.
You often talk about the Russian propaganda machine, and I couldn't believe this. Reading about a movie that's out in Russia called The Witness, a state sponsored drama. It premiered a couple of weeks ago, the first feature film about the war, and it depicts Ukrainian troops as violent neo Nazis who torture and kill their own people. One wears a t shirt with Hitler on it. The film also has the main character's young son wondering, isn't Ukraine Russia? I mean, this is incredible, and I'm wondering if this works, if the Russian people go for this stuff, or if there is a lot of anti-Russian feeling still there
Well, and
there
Bob,
in Russia.
yeah, well, unfortunately, we see this propaganda, or maybe amazingly, even in the United States. So yesterday I was at a restaurant here, an Israeli-style restaurant that is in the building where Golda Meir, who was the only female prime minister of Israel, is where she lived as a kid. She was born in Kyiv before she immigrated to the United States, and then later became prime minister of Israel. And so and there was a statue of her as I ate some Israeli shawarma here in Kyiv. And then I was reminded that I recently had seen a trailer. There was a new movie where Helen Mirren plays Golda Meir.
Mm-hmm.
And in the trailer, and it looks like a fantastic movie, but in the trailer, it's a 2 minute trailer. And in those precious 2 minutes, Helen Mirren playing Golda says, when I was a child in Ukraine, they would beat Jews to death in the street for fun. And that's all they say. And that strikes me as very gratuitous right now, as in this very sensitive time when we know Russian propaganda is active. Ukrainians, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, are standing for their freedom and fighting for their freedom. We talk so often about the chief rabbi of Ukraine, the way he's rallied people. And that there was a history. Yes, the Nazis occupied much of Ukraine, even as far east as Kharkiv. There also were the pogroms under the leadership of Catherine the Great and others. There's context there, and Ukrainians have been fighting against these imperial powers from east and west. And so, why would Hollywood put that in the trailer, knowing that this is, that everyone in this country is in a dire fight for freedom? That doesn't help. And it seems to me that maybe there is Russian influence and Russian money. And as we think about it, as I was thinking about those attacks on Kyiv yesterday morning, and it's easy to forget, but if the air defense had not worked, we would have thousands dead in Kyiv. It would be carnage, and because there was 20 missiles and drones, all of them were intercepted. 2 people were killed, but it could easily be thousands, and it's easy to forget what could have been, without the right support. But what's not easy to forget is the daily death toll. And for example, I just heard moments ago the news of a beloved British warrior. He was a volunteer fighter named Sam Newey. Incidentally, he's Jewish, and he came here to fight for freedom. He was 22 years old, and he just showed up, believing that he could not sit on the sidelines. He showed up in the early days of the full-scale invasion, and I was talking with a good friend of his. We were talking about sort of recalling his memory. And he said that when my friend, who was a French volunteer, said when he met Sam, they showed up at the train station in Lviv, and they just were figuring out how they could help. Sam had no military experience, and he told my friend from France, he said, let's go fight together. And he gave my friend the cross that he was wearing. He said, keep this, it'll protect you. Sort of this very selfless guy. And then he went and he trained, and he learned how to become a warrior. And he's been fighting the Russian invaders, a Jewish guy from the UK, standing for freedom, and now he's dead. And meanwhile, while people like that, who could be, in university somewhere in the UK, are willing to come here and give everything, and give that last full measure of devotion, your life for freedom. We have all the money and resources of Hollywood glibly attacking Ukraine. There was an article in the Washington Post a few days ago quoting Biden administration officials saying that the best weapon is strategic patience. People very much on the sidelines, afraid to actually engage this, afraid to recognize what's at stake. Even the Pope and the Vatican, afraid to say what Russia's doing is evil. They're afraid to speak, but we're surrounded here every day by people who are not afraid to walk down the street after a missile attack, or people who are not afraid to go to the front lines and fight in the trenches. And I think if anyone who's afraid of Russia's threats, take a vacation to Ukraine. You're welcome. We'll help you out. We'll show you around. We'll make sure you're protected. But take a vacation here, and that fear, I think, will go away.
Those small personal stories you tell, Joe, have more impact than even those headlines about the massive missile attacks. And, I'll take you up on that offer for a vacation, but I think I'll wait for the war to end. I don't have your courage. We appreciate your reporting, as always, Joseph.
Bob, thank you. And here's to by the way, they had the funeral yesterday for Juice, that fighter pilot. And his mother said she wants to fly F-16s now.
Wow.
And I believe it. I believe she'll do it. And so here's to the memory of Juice and Sam Newey and so many others who are dying every single day.
Incredible stories that stay with us. I hope you're safe, and we will talk tomorrow.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що він сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?